Once upon a time and far, far away, over the seas where enchantments lay. Once upon a time and far, far away, deep in the woods we will meet this day.
The singing, springing lark is a beautiful variant of the well-known Beauty and the Beast tale, in which the heroine must follow a trail of blood and white feathers left by her beast husband for 7 years, before outwitting the enchantress who had cursed him. It is an old tale told to Wilhelm Grimm by his future wife, Dortchen Wild, in 1814, and was included in the Grimm Brothers' second edition of tales in 1815. The Singing, Springing Lark. Once upon a time there was a man who was about to set forth on a long journey. He asked his 3 daughters what gifts he could bring for them on his return. The oldest daughter wanted diamonds, the second daughter wanted rubies, but the third one said, "Father dear, I would like a singing, springing lark." "If I can find one, I shall bring it home for you," he promised. He kissed his 3 daughters farewell and went on his way. At last, after many adventures, the father began his journey home. He had bought diamonds and rubies for his 2 eldest daughters, but he had searched everywhere in vain for a singing, springing lark. This made him very sad, for his youngest daughter was his favourite child. His path home led him through a dark and tangled forest. Through the brambles and briars, he saw the shape of a great stone castle, all hung with ivy and cobwebs. His horse began to snort and fret. Then it reared, throwing the man to the ground. It galloped off into the gloom, leaving him lying alone on the ground, his breath knocked out of him. The air was filled with the sweetest singing he had ever heard. He looked up. Flying high in the sky above him was a lark. The little bird dipped down and perched in a branch right above his head. "Aha! A singing, springing lark! You are just what I have been looking for," the man said. The man got up and began to climb the tree to try and catch the bird. But then a great lion leapt out of the shadows and roared till the leaves on the trees trembled. "I will devour anyone who tries to steal my singing, springing lark." The man was so startled that he fell out of the tree and lay on the ground right under the lion's roaring jaws. "I did not know the lark belonged to you," the man cried. "Please spare me." The lion growled menacingly and said, "Nothing can save you unless you promise to give me the first living creature that greets you when you arrive home." The man hesitated. "That could be my youngest daughter. She loves me the most and always runs to meet me when I return home." But then he looked at the great and terrible lion standing over him and thought to himself, "Perhaps it shall be the cat who greets me." And so he agreed, and the lion allowed him to leave the forest, with the singing, springing lark imprisoned in a cage. The man hoped with all his heart that it would be the cat who ran to greet him when he arrived home. But it was his beloved youngest daughter, Lulala. She threw her arms around him and kissed him, exclaiming with joy at the sight of the little bird. The man was racked with horror and guilt. He fell to his knees and put his arms about her waist. Alas, Lulala, my dearest child, I've had to pay a high price for this bird. I had to promise you to a wild lion, and when he gets you, he'll tear you to pieces and eat you up. When she heard the story, however, Lulala said, Dearest father, your promise must be kept. I will go to the lion. If he can talk, perhaps he's not such a wild and savage beast. Perhaps I can persuade him not to tear me to pieces. So, summoning up all her courage, the girl went into the dark and tangled forest, to the castle all hung with ivy and cobwebs, carrying the cage with the singing, springing lark. It took her a long time to walk there, and the sun was setting behind the castle towers. Her stomach was knotted with fear, and her hands shook. No lion leapt out of the shadows to devour her, however. All was still and quiet. Lulala tiptoed into the castle. In the dimming twilight, she found a great hall set with golden plates and goblets, brimming over with food and wine. But there was no fire lit on the hearth, and no candles in the candelabra. Greatly wondering, the girl ate and drank, and by the time she had finished, the room was so dark she could not see her hands before her face. Then the deep voice of a young man spoke out of the shadows. Thank you for coming. Do not be afraid. I mean you no harm. Who are you? The girl said in a voice that quavered. I am the prince of this castle. Once it was a merry place, filled with laughter and music. But then I was cursed by an evil enchantress after I refused to marry her. By day I am transformed into a wild lion. I'm only returned to my natural shape at night, and I must take care that no light of any kind falls upon me. For then I shall be turned into a dove and forced to fly about the world for 7 years. The girl was filled with pity at this story. We must make sure that no light falls upon you then, she said. The prince said incredulously, Then you will stay? Yes, she answered, and put out her hand to find him in the darkness. So the girl married the enchanted prince and stayed with him in the castle. By day she combed the lion's golden mane, listening to the sweet song of the singing, springing lark. By night, she lay in her prince's arms, discovering love. One day, word came to her that her eldest sister was to be married. The girl greatly wished to see her family again, and so the lion escorted her to the edge of the forest, and she ran all the way home. Her father and sisters were overjoyed to see her again, and were full of questions about the lion. Is he not cruel and fearsome? The elder sister asked. Is he not terrible and fierce? The second sister said. Do you not wish to come home? Her father said. My husband is good and kind, Lulala said, and I am happy and well. I do not want any other life. But in her secret heart, she wished that she knew how to break the enchantment. After the wedding, Lulala returned home, and her life at the old castle resumed. But she missed her family, and wished that she could introduce her husband to them. When news came, some time later, that her second elder sister was to be married too, Lulala begged the Lion Prince to go with her and meet her family. It is too dangerous, he told her. "Remember, if even the faintest thread of light was to touch me when I'm in my human form, I shall be transformed into a dove and must fly about the world for 7 years." But the girl promised to keep him safe from any light, and so the lion consented to go. In the dead of night, they travelled through the forest in a carriage without any lamps or linkmen, its windows blacked out with thick cloth. When they arrived, the prince was muffled in a great cloak and hurried down to a room prepared for them in the deepest, darkest cellar of the house. There, in pitch blackness, he met his father-in-law and shook his hand and congratulated the 2 elder sisters on their marriage. The girl's family were filled with wonder and worry in equal parts at this man who must live always in shadows. Then the girl kissed her husband goodbye and went with her family to the wedding feast. There was much merriment and dancing, and the girl wished with all her heart that her husband could celebrate with her. Afterwards, the wedding party walked back to the merchant's house in a long procession lit by flaming torches. After bidding all good night, Lulula felt her way down to the cellar, stumbling through the darkness as if she was blind. But as she opened the door, she heard the frantic beating of wings and felt wind blowing about her face. She cried out in alarm. "Light found its way to me," her husband cried in the high, thin voice of a bird. "For 7 years I must fly about the world. Every 7 steps I shall let fall a drop of red blood and 1 white feather. Follow me. Try to save me." Without another word, the dove flew out the door, and she ran after him. Every 7 steps, a single drop of red glistening blood and a single white feather fell, showing her the way. She followed till her dress hung in rags about her. She followed till her shoes were worn through and her feet were torn and bruised. She followed until nothing was left of her but shadows and bone. For 7 years she followed her beloved, till one day no little feather and no drop of red blood fell. When she raised her eyes, the dove had disappeared. The girl fell to her knees in despair, thinking she had lost the trail of her beloved. But Lulula took courage and said, "I will continue on as far as the wind blows and as long as the cock crows, until I find him." She raised her eyes to the sky and saw there the great burning disk of the sun. Lulula cried, "Sun, you shine into every crack and over every peak. Have you seen a white dove flying?" "No," said the sun, "I have not seen the white dove, but I will give you this little chest. Open it when you are in great need." She thanked the sun and went on until evening came and the moon was shining. She asked the moon, "Moon, you shine all night across the fields and the seas. Have you seen a white dove flying?" "No," said the moon, "I have not seen the white dove, but I will give you this magical egg. Break it open when you are in great need." Lulula thanked the moon and went on until the wind blew against her. She said to it, "Wind, you blow over every tree and under every leaf. Have you seen a white dove flying?" "Yes," said the wind, "I have seen your white dove. He is now a man again, for the 7 years are over. He is under a spell cast by the wicked enchantress who first cursed him. They are to marry 3 days hence." The poor girl wept. She had followed her beloved so far and for so long, and it hurt her cruelly to know that she was to marry another. But she dashed away her tears and took a deep breath, determined to do her best to save her beloved. Then the wind said to her, "Do not despair. You have the gifts of the sun and the moon, and now I shall give you another. Here is a little wooden flute. Blow on it when you are in great need, and I will send help." So Lulala limped on and on until she came to a great castle. Crowds of people dressed in all their finery were preparing for a great feast to begin the wedding festivities. The girl opened the little chest that the sun had given her. Inside, a golden gown glowed like the sun itself. She dressed herself in it, then went up into the castle. The prince did not see her. He stared blank-faced at nothing. But everyone else, even the bride herself, gazed at her in astonishment. "I want that dress!" the enchantress cried. "I must have it. Give it to me!" "Not for coins or jewels," answered the girl, "but for flesh and blood." "What do you mean?" the enchantress demanded. The girl answered, "Let me sleep one night in the room where the bridegroom sleeps." The bride did not want to allow this, but she wanted the golden dress very much. So she agreed, but then secretly she twisted the glowing ring upon her finger and tipped some white powder into the prince's wine cup. That night the girl was led into the room where the prince slept. She sat down on the bed and said, "I followed you for 7 years. I begged news of you from the sun and the moon and the wind. Have you forgotten me?" But the prince did not wake. He did not hear her. The next morning the girl gave the golden dress to the enchantress. The prince did not notice. He stared, blank-faced, at nothing. Dressed again in her rags, the girl sat and wept. At last, though, she gathered up her courage again and broke open the egg. Inside were ropes of pearls, each gleaming like tiny moons. The girl hung the pearls about her throat and went back to the palace. "I want those pearls!" the enchantress cried. "I must have them! Give them to me!" "Not for coins or jewels, but for flesh and blood," the girl answered. "Let me sleep one night in the room where the bridegroom sleeps." The bride agreed, intending to give him another sleeping potion. But this time the girl watched carefully. She took the goblet of wine the enchantress gave to the prince and swapped it with the enchantress's goblet. That night the girl sat on the prince's bed and said, "I followed you for 7 years. I begged news of you from the sun and the moon and the wind. Have you forgotten me?" The prince opened his eyes and gazed at her joyously. "My dearest," he cried, embracing her, "you have saved me. Now the curse will be broken and I will be beast no longer." They leapt up, ready to flee the castle, but the enchantress burst in, eyes flaming with anger. She raised her wand to strike them down, but the girl quickly lifted the wooden flute to her mouth and blew. As the sweet notes rang out, the wind sprung up and knocked the enchantress, heels over head over heels, all the way down the stairs. Then the wind transformed himself into the shape of a rainbow-winged griffin. The girl and her beloved leapt onto his back, and together they soared away into the rose-blushed morning sky and flew all the way home to their castle in the woods. From that time on, they lived happily until they died, listening together to the sweet music of the singing, springing lark.